Detriment to Suffering asks, I don't know if you've been asked this before, or if you've already answered, but when and how did you get into horror films? Again, that was with the older Hammer horror movies I mentioned earlier. Monkey2Ube asks, name 5 directors, actors or icons of the horror film genre you would most like to sit down with and do a roundtable discussion with. Right, Brad Dourif, because he's one of my favourite horror B-movie actors. Jeffrey Combs, for the same reason. Bruce Campbell, I think. I'd also like to speak to George Romero and ask him why all his current films are a load of crap. One more. John Carpenter, because he's one of my favourite directors, or certainly was back in the day anyway. Yeah, I'll go for those 5. He also wants to know, name a film or two that scared the absolute crap out of you as a kid. Again, Halloween and Friday the 13th, although I will hasten to add I was about 11 or 12 at the time. They certainly don't have that effect on me now. Mildreds Mittens asks, some of my favourite 80s horror films are yet to be released on DVD. Are there any 80s horror films you would like to get a physical release today? Yes, the film Mortuary, for one, which is a good old 80s chiller starring Christopher George, Bill Paxton, some girl out the Waltons. I would like to recommend that one to you, and I think that's high overdue for a special edition DVD release. And what is your favourite old school British horror film from the 50s, 60s and 70s? Hammer, Tiger or Amicus era? I'd go back to the Hammer films starring Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, namely Dracula and Frankenstein and those sorts of things. Job489 says, are you going to do a review of Scream 4? Well, I'm going to be going to see that one shortly, and if I get the time, I hope to do a video about it shortly afterwards. When it comes out on DVD, I may do a DVD review if one of the promo firms I deal with likes to send me a review copy. Hope that answers that. Mr. Donkey Dong 155, what an awesome name. He says, has there been any film outside of the horror genre that has creeped you out in some way? Yes, there has. The only one I can think of off the top of my head is one called The Road, which was a post-apocalyptic drama starring Viggo Mortensen. Basically, it's set out a number of years after a nuclear war, which has wiped out all the plant and animal life, and what few supplies remain are now being fought over by what few survivors there are, who are killing and stealing from each other, and in some cases even eating each other just to survive. It's a very grim and dark portrayal of just how far people go to stay alive, and I think the thing that sort of did it for me was this sort of situation is entirely possible, so yeah, I'd say The Road. Scream Queen Army asks, what are your top 3 favourite horror-related TV shows? I'll say Tales from the Crypt, Masters of Horror, and if you haven't heard of it, I would hardly recommend checking out a series called The Hammer House of Horror, which was a UK series by Hammer Films, which was made during the early 80s here in the UK. It's kind of like Tales from the Crypt, but without the Crypt Keeper, so I think it is available on UK DVD, so if you get a chance, check it out. Also, just to expand this to 4, I also kind of enjoyed the Walking Dead series, which was shown on satellite here in the UK last year, and they're now showing it on Channel 5. So yeah, definitely check out that one. Also, he asks, have you checked out my horror blog? Yes, I have, and I would suggest everyone else checks it out too. Here's the link. Tell them the Dark Angel sent ya. Qboy2K5 asks, how much time do you devote to watching movies a week? Well, I don't really have a set amount of time. I'll probably watch, about 3 films a week on average, maybe, depending on how many discs I get sent or what's been on TV. He also asks, what would your typical night entail? How long would you spend on your YouTube website and horror in general? Well, again, I don't really have a set time as such. Basically, when I get in from work, I'll grab a cup of tea and check my emails and see who's uploaded what to YouTube in my subscriptions. Then after I've had something to eat, I'll maybe watch a film. I'll probably spend about an hour or 2 a week just updating and tinkering with things on my website, and, I just do YouTube videos whenever I get time. E. Perry Third wants to know, who is my favourite Doctor Who, and what's your favourite Doctor Who story? Good question. Now, favourite Doctor Who, it's got to be Tom Baker from the classic era, as I'm a big old school Doctor Who fan, and Baker was, in my view, the best of the bunch. As for favourite story, then I'd go for Genesis of the Daleks, which was the first Dalek story to feature Davros, their creator, in, and was also a Baker story. So, yeah, Tom Baker and Genesis of the Daleks. Thrush1 asks, how do you feel about classic Hammer horror films? Yeah, I've answered that a couple of times. Yes, I have a big soft spot for those. Those were actually the films that got me into horror in the first place, I said earlier. And do you think that the horror genre will finally move away from inferior remakes and torture porn style films? Well, yeah, eventually. Yeah, I'm sure it will. I mean, if you look back on things historically, you tend to find things go in cycles. During the 30s it was all monster movies, during the 50s it was sci-fi horror, and during the 80s it was slasher films. During the 2000s it was, remakes and torture porn films. What'll probably happen is you'll get some new style of film come along which will prove popular, then Hollywood jump on the bandwagon, and then you'll see a shift away from, the torture porn and remakes, and they'll start emulating, whatever the next big thing is. But yeah, it'll move away from these eventually, but it will take time. Okay, Michael Byrne wants to know, do you wish the UK didn't have a film censors body and then the UK public could choose what they could watch on their own? Well, the short answer to that is yes, but there will still be limits on what we could watch here, as the UK has some pretty strict laws about material that the government considers inappropriate. We have laws like the Obscene Publications Act, which prevents the distribution of materials they think are liable to deprave and corrupt, whatever that means. And more recently, we have the Dangerous Pictures Act, which is a bit of a dodgy one you have to watch out for. Ideally, I would like to see a system like they have in Holland, whereby distributors are allowed to rate and classify their own films according to a set of industry guidelines. And I'd also like to see the abolition of some of these stupid laws we have, but I can't really see any of that happening anytime soon, to be honest with you. He also asks, what is your favourite scene from a horror movie? Well, probably the exploding head scene from Dawn of the Dead, because that scene was censored here in the UK for a good many years, so when we finally got to see it in all its uncut glory, it made it a lot more wondrous than perhaps it actually was. But failing that, then the zombie shootout from the end of the Beyond. He also asks, what movie would you like to see on DVD but is not at the moment available, and keep up the superb work? Oh, thank you for that. Again, I'd like to see a special edition DVD release of the film Mortuary. But yeah, I'll go for Mortuary on that one. Oh, now we have a couple of goodies here from Wayne Neild. First of all, he wants to know, what's your philosophy of life? Ooh, let's see. Try to be nice to people, avoid eating fat, read a good book every now and then, get some walking in, and try to live together in peace and harmony with people of all different creeds, colours and nations. Yes or no, I stole that quote from Monty Python, but yeah, philosophy in life, I just try to get along with people, I think. That's the best way to go about things. He also asks, what has been the biggest film-watching disappointment of your life? That could mean a good film spoilt for some reason, or even just a film that didn't live up to expectations. Right, off the top of my head, I think the biggest disappointment I've ever had was The War of the Worlds with Tom Cruise. I mean, just what the fuck were they thinking with that, I was, looking forward to a film that was supposed to be about alien invasion and hopefully humanity trying to fight back. What I got was 90 minutes of Tom Cruise driving around the countryside with his kids and hiding in people's basements. I mean, what the fuck's all that about? I mean, the film's one major battle sequence happened entirely off camera. That's, come on, we want to see this shit. I mean, what the hell were they thinking of? I mean, at least they got it right in the 1950s version, and, we saw all the battles going on and stuff. I mean, if you've seen Battle Los Angeles, they did it so much better. Now, that was actually a very good film, which you should see. A couple of other films I was disappointed with, which I'd like to mention. I Am Legend, with Will Smith. I wanted to see Will Smith battling evil mutants. All we got was 90 minutes of him wandering around an empty city talking to his dog. I mean, what the fuck? And how come he always managed to lose his rifle at the most awkward of moments? I mean, how come he didn't have about 10 guns on him at all times, which is what I would have done in his situation. But if you look at the 70s film The Omega Man with Charlton Heston, or even the old black and white Vincent Price movie The Last Man on Earth, which were all based on the same book, those films were infinitely more entertaining than the Will Smith version. I'd also like to add Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 to that list, as it was banned in the UK for many years. When we finally got to see it, it turned out to be a campy comedy, and Bill Moseley's character was just plain annoying. And also, I'll add to that Diary of the Dead. I mean, what the fuck was Romero thinking? I'll go to see a zombie film, and all I get is 90 minutes of a group of kids in a camper van arguing. What crap. But yeah, as for the biggest disappointment, War of the Worlds undoubtedly. Dark Danny 659 wants to know, do you write your DVD reviews before you shoot them? Yes, sort of. Generally, I make a few notes which I have on screen below the webcam. Although I do tend to, improvise a bit, and don't always read stuff word for word. He also asks, have you ever been to the US? No, can't say as I have. I think the furthest abroad I've been is possibly Gran Canaria, but no, not been to the US at all. Matthew Sama asks, is there any popular horror series that you hate and everybody else loves? Yes, actually. I was never a fan of the Nightmare on Elm Street films particularly, and couldn't believe how many of them they made, and I certainly can't understand why they were so popular. I mean, they all seem kind of dumb to me. You get some person watching TV who then starts to nod off, then quickly snaps out of it, only we know that he's actually now asleep. Then Freddy pops up, there's a brief scuffle, and that's it, he gets killed. The whole thing just seemed kind of dumb and pointless. That being said, though, I never had a problem watching Jason chasing teenagers through the woods in any of his films, so I don't know what that is, but anyway, yeah. No, Nightmare on Elm Street films, never really dug them at all, to be honest. Also, what is your favourite Cronenberg movie? Now, I'm probably going to get shouted down for this, but I'm actually going to say The Fly remake with Jeff Goldblum, because I thought that was pretty good fun. And his last question is, do you choose to be bald, or are you genetically bald? Right, yes, I am genetically bald, as you can see. I'm a bit thin on top, however, I generally shave the rest of my head to match. But yeah, genetically bald. Kenny Ferry asks, do you think the development of techniques like the CGI and 3D somehow managed to make horror movies even more cliched and easy to swallow? Well, cliched certainly. I'm not sure what you mean by easier to swallow, though. I'd say harder to swallow in terms of being realistic, but depending on the sort of film, yeah, they do make things fun, like in Piranha 3D. Right, and lastly, but by no means leastly, Orwellianson. He asks, have you made, or have you ever aspired to make a horror film of your own? Short answer to that is no, not really. To be quite honest with you, I wouldn't know where to begin, and it would undoubtedly be crap anyway. He also wants to know who your favourite filmmakers, George Romero and John Carpenter, although not so much for their recent films, more for the movies they did back in their glory days. I mean, certainly George Romero, whose recent horror output has been absolutely diabolical, to be honest, but anyway. He also asks, what do you do for a living? Good question. I work for a local food factory. Crap job, but it pays the bills. And lastly, he wants to know, what are some of your goals for your channel and artistic aspirations? Good question. I don't know about artistic aspirations, but as for my goals, just to share my love of horror with you guys, to be honest with you. Anyway, that's it for this question and answer session. I hope I've answered your questions thoroughly. I may do another one in the future. We'll have to see what sort of response this one gets, though. Hope I've answered all your questions. Be sure to let us know what you think in the comment section below, and be sure to rate and subscribe if you haven't already done so. So, anyway, till my next video.